I'm Heidi Zuckerman. I've spent my life connecting people to art to make their lives better. This podcast talks about art in contemporary culture and why we should care. Each episode is an impactful conversation with people I find interesting and think you will too, about their life, values, and always about why they think art matters. This is Conversations About Art. Sachs' sculptures, often recreations of modern icons using everyday materials, are copiously handmade, lovingly cobbled together from plywood, resin, steel, and ceramic. The scars and imperfections in the sculptures tell the story of how it came into being and remove it from the realm of miraculous conception. His studio team of 10 functions like a teaching hospital or cult that worships plywood and an ethos of transparency. We have been friends for over 2 decades, and I live with both a sculpture and a drawing that he made for me. The sculpture features the nickname that Lance Armstrong gave me one night that the three of us were together. In this episode, Tom and I discuss making as meditation, making the best of limited resources, output before input, what surprises him, the existential abyss, and his secret weapon to being an artist.
Hi.
Hey, Tom. I have really I've really been enjoying your missives during this time. And I was particularly taken by the one this week on repair. And I'd love to ask you about the actions that you decide to focus on and the verbs. And I also want to ask you questions about how it feels to get different people to engage in the activities that you're outlining.
Sure. So maybe it's worth taking a second to say that Heidi's referring to ISRU, in situation resource utilization, which is a discipline that NASA applies for using resources found on other planets to make oxygen and water and rocket fuel for a return trip home. And we in the studio employ to make the best of the limited resources that we have in the studio. So whether that's always like before this time of pandemic and shelter at home or shelter in place, or now where everything's heightened, we take our efforts to to amplify and make the most of what we've got. So on Instagram for the past 5 weeks, we've issued challenges, and the fifth and final one, although there will be some follow-up stuff, was called Repair, and we took I repaired something, so everyone on my team repaired something, and we issued some sort of words of encouragement to the public and our Instagram followership, and people took it really seriously and sent in all kinds of incredible repairs. And the idea behind this is that we have limited resources here during this time of isolation, but ultimately our resources are always limited. And if you consider how the resources that we have to make things are all taken from nature, and very often badly managed to the point where situations like this pandemic arise. And we're all seeing incredibly blue skies over New York City and Shanghai that we've never seen in our lifetime. We're seeing beaches with no pollution. We're seeing dolphins swimming in the canals of Venice, Italy, that we've never seen in our lifetimes because those canals have been so polluted by not just the little Zapparellos that zip around there, but by the cruise ships nearby dumping oil and sewage into the water. So the idea of in situation resource utilization is is much larger than we're showing it. It's just we're doing one person at a time. But even if you look at the resources of some incredible system like NASA that goes to other worlds, their resources are limited too, because if they had the resources that we had during the Cold War, we'd be at Alpha Centauri by now, or at least have people walking on Mars.
You were included in one of the first exhibitions that I ever curated in 1996. It was called American Dreamin'. And that exhibition had your work, which was a Ryder truck made out of shredded wheat on top of a pedestal, which was like a Brancusi endless column that was made out of FedEx boxes.
Oh my God.
And I was trying to think about how we first met each other and how I would have invited you to be in that exhibition. And I wonder if you remember how we met and if we knew each other before that show, or you even remember the show.
I of course remember. This is at the Matrix at the Berkeley Art Museum.
No,
Right.
This was even before that. This is 1996. This is when I still lived in New York. And this was in one of the first galleries in Chelsea on 22nd Street.
Well, okay. I mean, yes. So that piece, that was definitely at Morris Healey Gallery, which is
Okay.
Which was in 1996, which was my first show. And the piece was shredded wheat for Oklahoma City, and it was a work of art that I wouldn't dare make today, although maybe it has some resonance. And it was a model of the Ryder truck that Timothy McVeigh rented or stole, and then blew up the Oklahoma municipal building and killed all those poor people. And
So I must have seen it at that gallery, and then
yes.
asked to put it in my group show.
Where was that?
That was called American Dreamin', and it was at a gallery called Linda Kirkland. And you were in the show, and Lutz Bacher was in the show, and I don't know. Gonna have to figure out who else was in that show. But I remember, Fred Tomaselli was in that show, and honestly, my ex-husband's band played out on the street at the opening. I mean, it was
cool.
insane.
Cool. That's amazing. Love it. But yeah, I'm sure we met at that, because I was totally unknown before that. And that first show that I did with Morris Healey was the first. That was kind of like the beginning of things for me, and professionally in the art world, like publicly. I mean, obviously, I've been working for years before. I think it's 96, right?
Yeah. And yeah, my show was 96 because it was an election year. So that is so interesting. So right at the beginning. So that was the beginning of your career, and that was the beginning of my career too.
Yeah, we've grown up together.
Yes, we have. So how did you start making objects out of those branded materials? Because that's how I first saw your work, and the Chanel and Hermès and the objects that were made out of those materials.
Yeah, I think it was a time a little bit like now, 96, where I had a lot less resources. I certainly didn't have a dozen studio assistants and a following on Instagram of 250,000 people tuning in to see what, navel gazing I'm up to. But it's the same in that I had a lot, my resources are much more limited as they are today. And so we're forced to do what we got. And I remember the base of that sculpture I made out of FedEx packaging, because I learned that not only was FedEx packaging free, you could just walk in any FedEx and take whatever you wanted, but if you called them, because we didn't have email then, they'd send you whatever you wanted. So I made all these things out of FedEx packaging, and I know it's just cardboard, but it had an adhesive strip and it was all the same size and it was clean and new, so I could make whatever I wanted. I basically made Brancusis, and each element, each face of those cuboids is it's consistent. So I made it to the largest size of a FedEx package. So that generated the size of the column, the width of it anyway. And I don't know if that was clear, but basically the size of the box informed the final sculpture. And I was just making all kinds of things out of hot glue guns. I made a Hermes hand grenade, a Tiffany Glock, and it was all things that I was struggling to come to terms with. These are objects that in some way I wanted to possess or come to terms with. I mean, to make a model, to make a sculpture of a weapon of mass destruction, a bricolaged, a truck filled with fertilizer as an explosive, was kind of like a object of infamy. It was this terrible disaster that captivated us, and in a way, it seems almost every month there's some crazy white guy killing a bunch of people for no reason that he can explain, other than he's probably just not getting laid or misunderstood or whatever. Like, it's never people of color, and I mean, we just had one last month in Canada, right? Didn't we? Or 3 weeks ago, giant one.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's more and more commonplace. I don't really understand what it means. But I think the thing that's interesting to me, regardless of the politics of that, is obsessing about things that you can control. Like, you can't control something like that, and I was really bewildered by that disaster. But what I could control was obsessing about a Ryder truck and going to U-Haul and taking photographs and drawing them and learning and building a model of it, and through that making, the making itself becomes a meditation. And this is a strategy in a way that I adopted through my love of conceptual art, where to quote Saul LeWitt, you must pick an irrational idea, but irrational thoughts should be followed absolutely and logically. So once you decide you're going to make it might be irrational to make a highly detailed model of a Ryder truck out of a shredded wheat package, but once you make that decision, you follow it absolutely and logically. And I remember that sculpture is a tremendous amount of detail and is very precise, as best as I could do. I didn't waver from that.
I love this idea of making as meditation, and your citing of Saul LeWitt and his treatise on conceptual art and how to approach art making. And I'm interested in not just your 10 bullets, but in your 10 bullets, but also the language that you create around your practice for yourself and for the people that work with you. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you employ these dictums.
Well, with Saul, it's very easy to explain. Art's a very difficult thing to make, and sometimes you just don't know what to do. And the conceptual artists like Saul LeWitt or John Baldessari got to the edge of Western civilization in the 1970s. It felt like we'd done all we could do. We conquered space, went to the moon, we killed God, we broke the laws of physics by making the atom bomb and bring the sound barrier, and we broke the laws of reality by producing movies that were so realistic that we believed them as trains drove through on the screen. Trains drove through the screen. It looked like they were driving into the theater. People would run out of the theater. And these guys got to the edge of Western civilization, the ultimate expression of the Enlightenment, didn't know what to do, short of going to Asia. So they started making rules under which they were going to make art. And so this is sort of how I've always dealt with the existential abyss, is find some guidelines under which I could produce in a way that was physically, emotionally satisfying to me. Forget about intellectual, just the physicality of making stuff, because it's the body and engaging the body. So everything that I've been doing for the past 30 years has a sense of physicality. And that's why one of the other weeks that we had in ISRU was that your body is your greatest tool and how to take care of it. And so we did a kind of a Solowitz style wall drawings that we inserted the idea of push-ups in there, which is very not Sol at all. Like, he was a swimmer, but he wasn't the kind of guy that would do, he wasn't like H.C. Westerman doing gymnastics in the carpentry shop. He was just a different kind of person. But in a way, it's a genuine reflection of me and my team. That's something that we all do, push-ups. So I think I've always, as long as I've had a team, I've always set up these rules as a way of just making sure that the things have a consistency to them, that they all look like each other, that they're all part of the same family of sculptures, that they're all they all look like they're made by the same person. And I think that's something that I've struggled with because I'm interested also in heterogeneity, and I don't want everything to look the same, but I understand the importance of things communicating with each other formally.
How do you pick people to join your team?
They have to be really good at sweeping. I give them a broom, and if they're good at sweeping, it means that they're conscientious. And if they're not into sweeping, then they don't last. Or maybe I like them for some other reason, but they don't usually work out. Any skill can be taught. I'm just not interested in teaching attitude. You have to come pre-equipped with that. So one of the prerequisites that we have is you have to have worked in a restaurant or a commercial kitchen or something like a job like that, where you've already been through the torture of having to work on a team where a lot of people rely on you, so that you know what it means when the stakes are high, to like how to not let other people down, like put away your shit, basic stuff like that. I'm really interested in the basics. I feel like everything else can kind of grow from that.
What kind of personal routines do you have to start your day before you're around other people?
Well, and this is straight from Edward Tufte's mouth, or comes from him through me, and that's, before you look at your email, you must write in your journal. Like, before you put on a record, you must dance. Before you open the newspaper, you must touch clay. Output before input. You've had 8 hours of sleeping where your subconscious mind is active, and that subconscious mind works naturally to address the irrationality of life, the things that don't make sense. It's safe for them to not make sense in your dreams. The only time the time you have the most direct access to that very important surreal information is right when you wake up. So the idea of blocking that with input is a total waste. I mean, even if you spend 5 minutes before you got to deal with something, will come into your life, you will know what's happened. You cannot avoid that information. But before that comes to you, take a minute, steal a moment to output. And so for me, I always do ceramics first thing in the morning. I make a chawan, a Japanese tea bowl, or if I'm on a sculpture that I have in my house, like right now, I'm in the basement of my house in Queens, and I come down the basement, and even sometimes before coffee, I'll just start working on a collage that I was working on the night before. Because one of my sort of secret weapons, like someday I'm writing a book someday, right? If I write a biography, it's they're gonna be 50 ways to be a successful artist. And one of my secret weapons is, as you're drifting off to sleep, think about what your first move in the studio is going to be in the morning. Go through it in your head, rehearse it, and have that be your meditation of lulling yourself to sleep. And that's just a way of getting yourself psyched up for the next day. And I've been doing this since I was in college because I loved sculpture so much, and I would work till exhaustion, and then I'd go to sleep with a smile on my face thinking about the next thing I got to do. So that's been that's like kind of like the beginning and end of my day. Other than that, like I have a super snobby third wave exploitation free coffee, a coffee that's made by that's got a pack on the package. It says that this is like a exploitation reduced coffee maker, and I make that. I drink it.
When my son was really little, I heard this. I don't know if it's a fact or not, but I heard this bit of information that everyone has a limited capacity for creativity and story making, individual story making, and that space in your brain, you could either fill up with your own stories or with other people's stories until the time you were, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 11. I can't really remember. And that then you were basically set for the rest of your life. And so it would be determined at that point how much capacity one has for their own narrative creation. So with that, I decided not to have my son watch any television. I wanted him to have his own stories. And so I think it was to age 6 or something. And then, my daughter was born. So then we had to extend the no TV until, she was that same age. And I think it connects to that idea of, output before input, protecting the space for your own ideas before they're just populated, by everyone else's.
That doesn't sound totally crazy to me. I think that there are different modes. I don't know about capacity, but as for a developing person, I mean, the story that who we create ourselves to be is such a as a child, it informs the rest of our lives. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it doesn't sound insane. It makes sense.
I don't know if it's true either, but that became one of those things that once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it, and then I just needed to be responsible to it.
Sure. My son loves this terrible show called Blippi, and I think it was before your kids' times, but it's kind of like a really shitty Mr. Rogers, like a fucking like, I don't know. It's just like a super lowbrow, just distracting, but ultimately kind-hearted, not mean. But he goes into great places, like shows construction sites and factories and stuff. So of course my son loves it. It's just light, and I don't think Mr. Rogers proved to us that just because a person's young doesn't mean they can't handle more sophisticated, complex things. So yeah, he loves that show. I can't fight it.
I always have talked to my kids as if they were able to understand whatever it was that I was thinking about or struggling with or focused on. So, and I think it's worked out.
Yeah. So sounds like it.
When you make the chuans, do they get made on a wheel? Do they get made by hand? Are they pressed? Do they get fired? Sure.
So my tea bowls they're made of English porcelain. So there are a lot. It's the shape of a traditional 16th century tea bowl, but it's made of English porcelain, which is pretty much what our toilets and sinks are made of, like a very industrial process. I build them by hand. I don't use a mold or a wheel. I specifically don't use a wheel because it's too digital. Every time the clay goes around the turntable, it's almost equivalent to a 1 or a 0. And I want the bowls to show the evidence that I was there. So, and I use porcelain because it really picks up the fingerprints. So in 50,000 years, when they clone Adolf Hitler and Walt Disney back from their fingerprints, they'll be able to clone me back from mine too, because the fingerprint is in the it's in the porcelain, and porcelain is stone. So in 50,000 years, when the buildings that you or I are in have been reduced to rubble and built over many times, that tea bowl will still be around.
Do you drink green tea?
No, I hate it. It's just like it's disgusting green dirt. I love espresso, but I love the rituals around it, and I participate in that stuff. I don't really like matcha. Is just like, I don't understand it. It's not for me, for my body.
I don't know.
The only thing I hate more than green tea is surfing. Sorry, you're about to ask. What was that?
But so you just said you hate surfing?
Yeah.
But you surf.
Yes.
But you hate it?
I mean, sure, there are these moments around it that are wonderful. The orgasm of catching the wave, and the community. It's the quickest way into nature. There's just like a lot of things to hate about it. It's really hard.
It is hard.
It's hard work. The people are terrible. The equipment's fragile and expensive and difficult to transport. It's got a tremendously steep learning curve. It really sucks. I don't recommend it to anybody.
There's a bumper sticker that says "Surfing sucks. Don't try it."
Yeah.
It's also like same thing with sushi. No one should try sushi. It totally sucks.
Yeah, it's true most of the time.
But I love matcha. That's the thing that I look forward to the most about my day is my morning matcha.
Yeah. Do you do the whole thing with the whisk and everything?
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every morning. I actually have a portable whisk that I take with me.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I there was a time when I did that, and I could see getting back to it again because I'm a little bit of like an addict. It's like my coffee controls me. I don't really like that feeling of being, not being the boss of my own self. It's the only drug it's the only drug that I haven't been able to manage. That I haven't been able to kick.
What kind of stuff surprises you?
Well, that's a good one, Heidi. What surprises me? It's getting harder as I get older, right? Because I've accumulated all this information. So it's sort of like you were saying before about building your, it's like as you load the human computer's mind with new information, it's really easy in the beginning, but there's less and less space. I think what really surprises me more than anything is the technology this time that we're living in. I'm so thrilled with all these wonderful events that have occurred in my lifetime. Like, I saw this movie called An Introduction to Feedback by the Eames Studio, and it was from like 1957 or something. It's basically the idea of what Uber is, or Waze, that each car is a sensor, and they all know where a big computer knows where it's going. And then once you get all that information together, you can predict the most direct route to minimize traffic. And whatever, it took 70 years or something for that to come true, and 50 years for it to really happen. And I just love it, and like the feedback system with stars for Uber drivers or eBay or whatever, and and the incredible beautiful domination of nature, and we've created all these amazing things, and we're synthesizing life almost, it seems, with where these computers are getting so good, it's almost like artificial intelligence is here, that the singularity is here now. And but I'm also equally excited to see that all unraveling right now, with nature finally saying, in some way, because all of nature is connected, it's one symbiotic system, saying enough is enough and shutting down our system by targeting white males between 40 and 70 years old, the guys who are in charge, and saying enough is enough. We're going to like send out a virus to kill those guys. And I'm like smack in the middle of that time. So it's like, it's coming after me. I don't like that, but I like the bigger picture of it. And I think it's wonderful, surprising thing. I mean, it's horrible that it's coming to kill me, and that scares the shit out of me. And I've lost some great people, but and more will perish through this. But we have to look at the big picture. That's the natural environment, and like it's enough that we are saying fuck the environment. I'm only worried about me and my family. Like, we live in nature. New York City is inside of nature. And we're only seeing it now. I mean, you can watch movies like Last Man on Earth or Omega Man or I Am Legend. They're all the same movie about human beings living in cities without civilization. But we're all living it now. And I think this is a huge wake-up call. And it's shocking. But what a wonderful opportunity for us to say, hey, we can have nature. We can have industry. But let's just like fucking chill for a second, guys, and do maybe like a little bit better job of managing our resources. I think that's what I liked about the tea ceremony, is that it's the four tenets are harmony, tranquility, hospitality, and respect. And we're guests, and we're not respecting our environment. So
that's one of the things that I really loved about living in Aspen, was how super apparent nature was all the time. Not just the number of different animals that we would pass between, the house and school, but also the idea that there would be certain days where it didn't matter what your plans were. If it was going to dump snow, you were not leaving.
Is that right? Was school canceled a lot? How did it work?
School would be canceled, or flights would be canceled. And it was such a constant reminder, really, of how wrong we were to think that we were ever really in charge.
Yeah. It's just very scary, this new election that will very likely tip to Trump's favor. He'll have another 4 years. This will have global consequences that will make what we're experiencing now look like nothing. I mean, we'll have other things that will be so catastrophic, especially as the polar ice caps melt, as we continue to pollute the environment.
Have you made art that you think is political?
Oh, I don't know. I think every art has a politic in it. I mean, political art's propaganda. When I make like a Chanel guillotine, there are some people that think that I'm loving Chanel. Other people think that I'm hating it. Other people think I'm for capital punishment. Other think I'm not. That it's so. Like, I think it's important that people can read into it different things. That's what makes it art. Is that it's complex, and it's not important what the artist thinks. It's what the response is. But there are politics in everything. There's if you make a stainless steel polished balloon dog, it's one set of values, and if you make something out of things that are around you that have had a previous life and are obsessed over in a different way, that show the evidence of you having been there, it's a different set of politics. And I don't think that like one's better than another. I know there's one that I believe in, and that's the one that I do. But I think that that your values can be, I mean, it can be seen in the object. I mean, I always feel like I can tell what kind of art someone makes with 75% accuracy just by the way they dress and speak. If they say they're an artist and I can talk to them, I can guess, you can tell if it's abstract or figurative. You can tell if it's messy or clean. You can tell if it's good or not, usually. 75% is my...
Okay. We're talking. This is a audio only, not visual.
Yeah.
Describe how you dress and describe what you talk about and describe how that would be expletive of at least 75% accurate in terms of the art that you make.
Oh my God. Well, okay. So, I mean, for me, I think everything is sculpture, right? So if you're looking at my outfit, right, from the bottom up, I'm wearing Nikes that Nike builds for me and my sculpture making team, because we're professional athletes and our sport is sculpture. So, and there are these sneakers. They're called Mars Yard, and they are for people who work in the Mars Yard, the simulated yard of Mars in Pasadena, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, because they're our friends. And we have our own space program. We have our Mars Yard also. And then as you work your way up, I've got denim jeans that are in American style, but they're made in Japan on a old American loom. So you can see this, that it's a salvage denim. They're made by hand. They're really expensive. They got holes in them, and they've been repaired many times so that the life of I bought them new, but I repair them over and over, so they have some evidence that I use them. And then on top, I've got a French work smock from the 60s that I dyed black and sewed a 10 bullets patch. 10 bullets is the logo of my cult, and it's the 10 bullets. It's the indoctrination film. When the first day at work, when you show up, you have watched this movie, and it tells you how to behave if you want to stay. And then my wristwatch is a Casio G-Shock DW 5600 that I've been wearing for 25 years. I've had several of them. They break, get lost, but I replace them. I don't have a Rolex. I have the best watch ever made, the most indestructible thing. It's light, it's strong, it tells the time without looking at my phone. And my glasses are aviator, like Ray-Ban styles, but they're made by Barton Pereira, and they're made of titanium that have been nickel plated to look back like steel. So they're stronger, but they look like steel, and they have like premium polycarbonate lenses that are coated for non-reflective glare. So I think if you were to look at all of those things, you might, and some of them were kind of messy and dirty, but they're also all kind of refined. If you were going to use my like insane like judgment of someone, I think you would see that the sculptures are just like that they're made of existing stuff for people in a community. My sculptures are not made for a museum. They're made for me and my team. And that's where they generate their authenticities through their use. Whether it's part of a space program or a tea ceremony or some other ritual that we make up to add depth to our lives. When they graduate from the studio, sometimes they wind up in museums and collections and other places to communicate for us. But they always show them how they were made in the same way that those jeans were repaired, or the sneakers that we make. They all have transparent material, so it's like the sole is natural polyurethane, or not natural polyurethane. It's not natural, but it's the native color of polyurethane, or the native color of rubber, or the native color of pigskin. And there's a reason why blue jeans are blue, because the indigo dye that's used is durable. It doesn't fade very quickly. It's consistent. stays. That's traditional. And I guess to quote Noguchi, what you're looking for is, how do I say it? It's the true development of old technology. Build incrementally.
Your studio practice is so key to your sculpture practice. And I've been in your studio many times. The first time I actually fired a gun was in a chamber in your studio. And I've been there with my son. And there are all these kind of micro areas. There are areas where you have to have certain hand coverings or face coverings. There are, clean areas, there are dirty areas. How do you move around the space? How long do you spend in different places? Do you do things, a bunch of different things at the same time? Do you do one thing and follow it through? Talk about how you physically exist in that space of productioning.
Well, that's a tough question. It varies day by day. I can tell you about my ideal day, which is always the best, and that's that. I spend time in one area, doing a quick sketch, and then I'll maybe go over to the wood area and build the thing out of wood, and then in the middle of it have some paper there and do some drawings at the wood table to make some changes on site. Like I would never draw something on a computer and send it out. I think that mistakes in the process generate authentic details. And then maybe I would, if I was really lucky, I'd bring it over to the metal area and apply some metal parts, which would mean fabricating some parts out of steel or stainless steel or titanium, and then bring those over to maybe like the drill press and drilling out. And then bring that over to like the hardware store and selecting some hardware to screw it all together. And that maybe the object would return to one of these other places. Like I would go back to the wood shop for some cuts, or maybe I'd fuck it up and have to resin something back. So I'd bring it to the resin room and apply some epoxy resin with some fiberglass or carbon fiber for reinforcement. And then maybe I'd bring it up to the studio upstairs to do some wood burning on it. Or maybe if it needed a lot of wood burning, I'd do a drawing on it. And then someone from my team would burn in the lines so I could just draw it quickly. But then the studio system could burn lines into, so that it would, in a way that I've taught them, so that it would have greater depth. And so I could be working on a different component, and that the sculptures would rotate around the studio, doing many times, accumulating the debris and scars and filth of each of those processes. So you might see the smoke from the wood burner. You might see, like, sawdust usually brushes off. You don't see that, although it could be mixed in with the glue. If I was sloppy, you'd see the evidence of that. Or if on the metal table, the metal's really dirty and dusty, so you might see some carbon marks on something.
Do you listen to music?
I do, but it's one of those things, like, as you get older, it gets harder. And to get new music into your life. There's some chart that I saw about how people's tolerance for new music drops off. So one of the best things about having young studio assistants is you get to have new music into your life. And we are also, by the way, living in this golden age of hip hop. I mean, you could say the 90s was the best, because you had Biggie Smalls and Public Enemy and Straight Outta Compton and stuff, but he's got Beyonce now. We're in a good time. So I'm really feel very lucky that we got to live now.
You talked about the 10 Bullets film and the cult indoctrination, and a couple times you've mentioned this idea that if people want to stay, they have to clean up after themselves, or they have to they have to be a good teammate. How long do people stay with you?
As I'm getting older, I'm kind of softening up. So people tend to stay longer. I was a real tyrant when I was younger, so people wouldn't stay as long. But I mean, there are people on my team that have been there for 5 years, 8 years, 15 years, 10 years.
Wow.
These are all, and then there are people who aren't on the team anymore, but get reconscripted when we have a big space program. So we've got a big show coming up at Dijksterhallen in Hamburg in September, the next space program. So it's a giant effort. It's all hands on deck. If you graduated from the studio, you get the call up and you gotta come back. And we have graduates, because Heidi, one thing that I think would be a fun follow-up question that I'll just ask is like, how do people leave the studio? And of course, you know, people get fired. You get fired if you steal or like take some things from the studio that I gave you and put it on eBay, or if you burn the place down. But people like leave because they don't get us and we don't get them. But the other way people leave is by graduating. Like they've done what they could do, and they go on to take what they learn and to develop their own thing. So like Pat McCarthy, who's at Pigeon Pat on Instagram, for example, who I'd encourage you to follow, is an amazing guy. And he lives in Bushwick, and he has 200 pigeons, and he's got a pigeon loft, and he takes care of them, and he makes incredible art and shows it around the world, amazing zines. And he just has a farm upstate, and he's going to do that. And he does incredible videos about his world on Instagram and YouTube. Called Babylon Gardens is the name of his coop or loft. Sorry, it's a pigeon loft, and or gang. And but like he's come, you know, if he calls himself a friend of the studio, he's got to come back and help us build the new elements for the space program, because it's so complex. So,
we've got a great
ceremony. It depends, but you know, every year we have the award ceremony, and sometimes people come back for that, and that's like the current staff. So like we have, you know, the Evan Murphy Award for self-improvement, and that's named after Evan Murphy, who's, you know, a professional cyclist and industrial designer and artist who lives in Portland, Oregon. And so we always have an award for John Ferguson, who wrote 10 Bullets with me, who's kind of my first studio assistant, and he lives in LA now, and sometimes does stuff in the studio still. Occasionally we make things and together still, but you know, infrequently. It's just kind of when it makes sense for both of our lifestyles. He's moved on to do other stuff, but we try and like stay connected. You know, Van Neistat graduated with high honors, became a man in the studio, and you know, has his own filmmaking career. We still make movies together, and he makes his own movies too. So,
Tom, what are you most proud of?
I gotta say, I know we're talking about the team, but I'm really most proud of my team. I feel like my biggest skill, my best skill, the skill I would brag about, would be my ability to select people, and to develop them and retain them. That's been my biggest triumph, because like I'm loving this time in isolation, because I'm in the basement in Queens, like Joseph Cornell or my grandparents, doing bricolage all the time. So I'm really enjoying it. But I have a space program to run, and you don't have a whole space program without having a lot of people to run it. And my team is incredibly dedicated. We are working 7 days a week, all of us, to keep this going. I mean, there were 2 people on staff just full-time organizing Ubers, driving elements from one person's house to another, so that everyone can work on. People with different skill sets can. So we have full employment. Everyone is completely engaged, and it sucks. I mean, it's very inefficient. We're operating at like, I don't know, 45% of our 30 to 45% of our normal efficiency. We're way down, but we're not, you know, you can't kill bad grass.
So why does art matter?
Art, it matters that you make art instead of trying to save the world, because human beings specialize. And you might make the work of art that inspires the doctor to cure cancer. Art, in all of its forms, helps different people find spirituality. It's our religion, and it's been there since the beginning of time, and has taken all kinds of different shapes and turns and twists. And your job is to, as an artist, is to do the best kind of art that you can do. I used to think that I should use my charisma and magnificent gluteus maximus to be in politics to sway people towards not destroying the planet. And Mario Diacono said, Tom, that would be a huge waste. You're a great artist. Focus on your art and let your art influence the right people. Win them over, bring joy to the world through your art. And I think that's what we do. And I think that's why, it's an elite practice. It's not for everyone. It's hard to do. It's not easy to do well. So not everyone makes it, but you can make a difference. And it doesn't really matter if you're making a sculpture or cleaning a toilet. It's just how you do that thing. My lawyer is way more creative than most artists that I know.
I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Oh, Heidi, you're the best interviewer. You always ask the best questions, and I really appreciate it. I look forward to many. We've done so many and many more. So
I will look forward to when we get to talk in person next.
I know.
But
me too.
I love the way your mind works, and I love your sculpture, and I love that you are in the world.
Oh, thank you, dear.
Conversations About Art is part of Heidi.art, a multi-platform project that connects all to art through a podcast series, books, talks program, brand collaborations, TV, and more. This episode was produced by Simon Illa. Our theme music was composed by Eric McDougall. Blake Migden assists with social media content editing. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and review us on whichever platform you listened, as it helps us further our goal of connecting all to art. We will be back again every Tuesday with new episodes. Thanks so much for listening.